Either there's lots of rioting in Egypt, everybody knows it. I don't really like the violence, and I don't really think it's a good thing either for the people or for the government, because if they're gonna ask for democracy, then you'll be sure that they'll be also inviting all the lobbying and all the influencing of the general public, which is usually ignorant to lead, and they will lose their autonomy as a country, as Egypt. Of course, it's not good if a government doesn't listen to the demands of the people and doesn't really make facilities for it, doesn't really create room and let's say it doesn't take its role and responsibility seriously. It just tries to fend for itself, as we see all, let's say, more influential people in the world basically do. As soon as you get the influence, you start serving yourself, or maybe it's simply the principle that anybody that has the ability to ascend in a power structure environment will have to be egocentric and self-serving, otherwise he won't reach the top. So it's basically a survival of the fittest, and the fittest isn't really a social individual. I saw that Max Kaiser's site is down, it's not working. I hope it's not an intervention by some authority to reduce his influence, because he is, of course, let's say, egging on the violence. I think there has to be a change, and I really don't think you necessarily need to egg anybody on, because these people are living the life that they don't like, and they're responding right now, and they see everybody do that. I don't think social networks will I guess they will give people the sense that they're not alone, which is of course the big selling point of Facebook, and of course the benefit of it. But once things get going, there's really no stopping it. I don't believe that's the case. But Mubarak still wants to stay in office, and I also think that's a mistake. But he doesn't have a choice, and comes back to my theory that individuals do not have a natural way to descend from their authority, because usually that's associated with death. In an animal life, if you're the leader of a troop, you're the alpha male, let's say, you're the dominant guy, then you have offspring and you can take care of them. You have to fight every challenge to that authority, because if you lose that fight, you lose. You're basically gone, you're dead, you're no longer there. That's the instinctual response that everybody has that reaches a certain level of affluence and power, and that's also the reason why, let's say, the current system is so malicious, because it's a fiat system, it's based on promises, and it gives people enormous power. Some people like Warren Buffett and George Soros and Glenn Beck, I guess, because everybody that reaches a certain level, and the US as a country and Europe as a union, everybody that reaches a certain level of power and authority doesn't have the courage and the instinct, and cannot really reason to go to a lower level anymore, because that's simply the built-in mechanism. It's a one-way ticket, and if you win, you win, and if you lose, you're gone. So that's not an option. And that's going on, of course, with Mubarak. He's in his office. He knows if he leaves, he loses everything. The gold is not going to come with him, or with his families, and with his, let's say, friend, the little group that he has. And I really don't know which one is good or which one is bad, because autonomy is the key to being able to create wealth for the people, and a low living standard is not an exception. It's not a bad thing per se. Let's say if you don't have a SUV, you don't have a wide screen television, and you don't have a huge house, and you don't have all these things, and you have to work every day to make a living. That's been the way for thousands of years. So I don't think you can really judge it ethically, because people are as happy in that situation as they will be in a consumer society, and probably they're a little bit happier because they don't have to worry about their debt and their credit that they've been loaded with by fiat bankers. So I wrote a little piece on my own website, and the conclusion is that you really have to, if you really want to be an atheist, or I guess if you want to be a pure Christian, or a pure Muslim, you have to also denounce the religion of Keynesianism, which is exactly the same as, for instance, what I know about Christianity is you're born into sin, and everybody sins, and then you have to find redemption for your sin. Well, these days everybody is born with a debt. You can't see it, you don't know where it is, you don't know who owns it, and everybody has to work it off, his life. And that's what basically, that's your position. That's where you start if you're being born. Your parents have a mortgage, and usually, and then you need to work for your money. It's a complete nonsense system, in my opinion, because it's based on free oil, which is basically stolen in our name, which is good. It's a benefit to us. But the people that manage the money pretend that we now owe them something because they distributed the oil to us and the energy. If you try to make an analysis of, let's say, for instance, like a regular person like me, and all the things that I do, I have a cup of tea from a cup that is, of course, being well, the stone is being dug out of the ground using electricity or diesel, and then it's being baked usually with electricity, and then it's being transported with diesel to my shop that's being lighted with electricity. That is, and if you analyze then what percentage of whatever we have is energy, then I think if you try that really hard. So if you also take, well, of course the shop had employees and they have a salary, and of course if they go home, then a quarter of that is going to be spent on their own home energy delivery, but they also buy products which are, let's say, 85 to 95 to maybe 99% dependent on energy to be created and being accessible, etc., etc. You go through that whole graph that you can create recurrently, as you should. I think you end up with that the things we have are basically 99.9%. Their cost is energy, oil, gas, electricity. All the labor is being paid in form of products which are in turn only made because there is energy, and people that of course use energy. So if you look at it that way, then you basically have a system in which everything is free until somebody puts a price on it, and it's usually an investment banker, extends a loan to somebody that's then going to dig it up or mow it down or do something with it. And all the while that money is being spent on energy. Energy is spent. Let's say the oil is burned. It's evaporated into our atmosphere, sadly, and it cannot be repaid. That's the bottom line, in my opinion. I guess I would have to make some kind of graphic animation of it. Not graphic in the sense of indecent, but or disgusting, but graphical. I'm not sure. And that's where my biggest problem is with the current system, is that it's all energy. It's an energy distribution system. Nobody should derive any right to control and to give favors to their friends only because they have the privilege to do this distribution. Last thing, I read an article on the BBC website about England. English government is planning to sell off its forestry trust. So that's all the public forest to a private group, which will then, of course, sell the timber company. So they're gonna, let's say, cut down all the trees in England. All the trees except a few that will be managed by charities, which is like the ancient forests. And that should really enrage people in the UK, England, and in general the whole thought that on the one hand a central bank can basically print billions and billions and billions of euros in Europe, and of course it doesn't really go for England because they have the pound. It's their own mistake. But in England, of course, they do exactly the same thing. They make billions and billions and billions of pounds. And then still, somebody really wants that assets, and somebody has to pay with pounds for wood and transportation of it and all that stuff, and that's just going to happen. And the only reason why I think that, and of course it's complete nonsense, because you cut down the trees and you sell the wood, and the wood gets turned into furniture or burned. So it's and of course the whole carbon capture effect of these trees is gone. The economical effect is next to zero. It's zilch. It's insignificant. It doesn't really mean anything. And you basically have a desert, let's say, completely destroyed the face of UK. And these forests are in the public domain. They are part of the commons. That's why the government was entrusted with them in a trust. So they're not for sale. They're not from the government. They're from the UK people. It's sick. It's just, this is where these type of systems need to end, where they start to kind of, next thing you know, you have the UK prostitution fund, where everybody with a beautiful daughter can prostitute her. Just like if you look at this movie Catch-22, and somebody asked about it. There's a Spanish version. It's on YouTube. You can see it on YouTube. And basically, what happens in Catch-22 is that there's a war on, and these people are in Italy, and they're flying sorties, and it's all kind of crazy. And the whole idea of the Catch-22 is that if you fly, you are probably crazy. But if you ask to not to fly, then you're healthy, which makes you then fit to fly. So every time you try to escape the procedure by saying, "Doctor, I don't want to fly anymore; it's too scary," then they say, "Okay, that you're sane enough to fly." And then if they pretend they're crazy, they say, "Okay, yeah, but only crazy people would fly, so that makes sense." That's usually made the point of that movie. But if you watch it, then you see that there's the insanity, which is demonstrated by almost every character in the movie, is also captured by M&M Enterprises, which is I believe it's a corporation, they call it, that's set up by one of these people. And first they sell the parachutes for eggs, and then it goes on and on and on until they're basically bombing themselves in order to get money from some of their clients. So eventually the whole, if commercialization is introduced in it, eventually the whole enterprise, everything, becomes commercial, and it doesn't make any sense anymore, because it's just there's no point in this whole in the whole war anymore, and the whole fighting effort, because it's not about liberating anybody or doing anything. It's about making money. And just like boxing matches, it's like a boxing match doesn't make any sense. One guy pounding another to pulp, but people make money of it. So that's why it happens. It doesn't make sense in a moral way, let's say, in a way of protecting your health, protecting your this individual's future. He doesn't have to fight, but he's doing it for the money. And of course, all these pilots, they are in the airplane, and they are under fire, and they try to look for the parachute, and they don't find it because it's being sold. and in the end, even the first aid kit, the guy opens the first aid kit box, and there's a little note of M&M Enterprises. Let's say this box is empty by courtesy of M&M Enterprises, and referring to the prostitution. The brothels in Italy, which I guess in those days Italy was rather poor, so it had a lot of loose women. But in the end, it's corporatized, and everybody has to wait in line in order to visit their prostitute in an M&M Enterprise brothel. So that's why I refer to the Catch-22 movie, and I think it's very relevant for the whole process. And you also know where you can stop it. You can stop it where people with purely commercial interests are allowed to influence processes that are essential for the health of society. And I don't think it's. I don't have a platform and a history of preaching like this, but I do think that discovering that these movies have actually quite another core of narrative than I previously saw. is quite interesting. But thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.